What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Episode 37 of the Sicko Sports Podcast. It is Monday, December 20th. Thank you guys for being here. Like always, before I get into anything, like, subscribe, hit the alert button so you get all videos alerted to you when they drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, film session, and just other clips, other cool videos I want to post out to you. If you're watching this on Spotify, if you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts are, feel free to jump over. There is a YouTube version as well. And then for YouTube, same thing. If you guys are busy, if you don't pay for YouTube Red or YouTube Music, whatever the hell it's called, if you're not paying for the subscription to get you guys being able to just put it in your pocket and listen to the podcast, and you want to do so, please head over to Spotify, and you have all episodes on there as well. So you guys can enjoy either way. But thank you guys for your support. Still growing, still going. And what a wild weekend. What an insane weekend. And how do we talk about this weekend without talking about the biggest story of the weekend? Jake Paul knocks out Tyron Woodley, sends his soul to the shadow realm, sends him into a different dimension, into a different universe. Wherever Spider-Man's at, haven't seen it yet, don't spoil it. Wherever Spider-Man's at in these multiverses, Tyron Woodley's soul is somewhere floating around there. Tell him to bring it back, put it back in his body, out cold, stiff as can be. A terrible fight. Boring fight until that point. The crowd was booing. Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal took off. They left early. They didn't even see the knockout that Jake Paul put on him. But when he landed, when he connected, it's a shot that he put everything into and just sent Tyron Woodley out of there. Interesting thing for Jake Paul, he kept saying that he was setting up that shot throughout the fight. He was setting it up, and he found out that he was going to be able to come over the top, turn it over, and knock him out with it. I'm going to be honest, man. You could see it. You could see it throughout the fight. Jake Paul was about to hit him with a body shot. It looked like it was going to be a body shot. Tyron Woodley dropped his hand, trying to catch it low. He brings it over the top, and just every single ounce of power he had, he put on Tyron Woodley's chin directly. I don't care who you are. That is a shut-off, good-night punch. So for Jake Paul, what's next? What is next for Jake Paul? It's going to be interesting. I know after the fight, he mentioned Jorge Masvidal. He mentioned Nate Diaz. He always mentions Conor McGregor. These guys are still under UFC contract, man. It's impossible that they're going to be able to get a fight with Jake Paul now because they still have fights left under their contract. Now, there is a situation where they can fight Jake Paul, but it would have to be a UFC promotion as well. They would have to put it together with Dana White, and the UFC would have to get broken off alongside. I don't know if Jake Paul nor these guys want to do that, right? If Jorge or Nate can go out and make millions of dollars to fight Jake Paul, I don't think they care if the UFC has to get broken off as well, if it's their biggest payday. I don't think they would care too much, but I think for Jake, his promotions and that side of the aspect, they don't want to do it with the UFC. They would like to get more fights done without them because it's just more piece of the pie that they have to share that they don't want to, which they shouldn't have to. I mean, the UFC is an MMA promotion. To have them come over to the boxing world for simply having a fighter under contract, it's not like the UFC would bring more eyes in its own right? It's really Jake Paul and whoever he's fighting. Jorge and Nate have done enough to make a name for themselves, so I hope they get those fights eventually. But as of right now, it's hard to imagine that they can do it while still under UFC contract. However, there are some names, there are some guys out there. One name in particular that is not under UFC contract, that does know how to box, right? He checks all the boxes, right? You can't be under UFC contract. You can't be a real boxer. And thirdly, you have to be a step up in competition from Tyron Woodley. We don't want to see him box somebody who's a step down in competition. And you have to be the fourth one, the obvious one. You have to be a recognizable name. We got to know who you are. There's one person that checks every single one of those boxes, and his name is Anderson the Spider Silva. Anderson Silva just knocked out Tito Ortiz very disgustingly, right? He beat a real boxer in Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. not too long ago in his pro boxing debut. And now here we go. Why not set that fight up? I know Jake Paul has spoken before about the admiration and respect he has for Anderson Silva, but when the money's right, the money's right, man. And I don't think this is the one thing that people don't get from Jake and Logan. They know how to market themselves. They know how to deal with media. They've done it their whole life. You see Logan Paul. Nate Diaz is out here having these verbal altercations with Jake, and they're going back and forth on Twitter and all that. We saw videos of Logan Paul shaking up hands with Nate Diaz, talking to him. What's up, man? Big smiles on both of their face. They're friends. Or at least they're friendly to each other. They know what this is. They know what's going on. Jake Paul and Logan Paul can always be that way. People don't give them enough credit for being very good at marketing and knowing how to market themselves. So if he were to get a fight with Anderson Silva, there's not going to be bad blood. There's not going to be a whole bunch of crap talking. It's going to be Jake Paul talking about how much admiration he does, and he's going to he's going to paint the picture that he's David, Anderson Silva's Goliath. He wants to test himself. He wants to just prove that he can do it at a high level, and that's how he's going to paint this narrative. So he can still get the fight done while still having that respect, or not going back on the words that he said about how much admiration he has for Anderson. And for Anderson Silva, I don't care what this kid has said about me. I don't care how much he's talked about how much he idolizes me or respects me or gives me credit for my boxing skills or what I've done in both sports. I don't care what he says. This is a big-time payday in a fight that I feel like I can win. And it'll be interesting to see how the crowd votes. Where does the public go with this fight? Because everybody was on Jake Paul. Even in the first Tyron Woodley fight, Jake Paul came in as a favorite. And he remained the favorite. And this one, he was even a bigger favorite. And then he gets the knockout. So against Anderson Silva, it's very interesting how that line would open. If Jake Paul would be the favorite against Anderson Silva, and how other people would feel about it. Because it also would be the biggest guy that he's ever fought. Anderson Silva fights at 190. That's Anderson Silva fought in the UFC at 185 and at 205. He's in that range. He is 6 feet tall. Anderson Silva is a much bigger opponent than Jake has ever fought. Obviously, when you consider the YouTube guy and Nate Robinson much, much, much bigger. But even Tyron Woodley, even Ben Askren, a much taller, lanky, naturally bigger guy in Anderson Silva. So that's the fight I want to see made. And then it goes to Tommy Fury, right, when it comes to, I know everyone's calling him Tommy fumbles, and he fumbled the bag. I think he really did. I think that was his opportunity, because now if you're Jake Paul, why would you go back and fight Tommy Fury? You're fighting Tommy Fury after a good fight with Tyron Woodley that went to decision. If this fight had went to decision again, and Jake had won another decision fight where people may feel like he shouldn't have won, then maybe I see why Tommy Fury would make sense. That fight was supposed to be made. Let's still make it happen. I don't see it anymore. With the way he knocked out Tyron Woodley, the amount of views that are on that highlight knockout, it puts him into another tax bracket. It puts him on another tier of capability. So now no one's going to want to see him against Tommy Fury. Not the way they would like to see him against Anderson Silva. And for Tommy, it's interesting because Tommy doesn't really have that big of a name, especially in the States. I know Tommy's a bigger entity outside of the United States. Obviously, in England, he's a much bigger entity there. But here in the United States, no one really knows about Tommy. We know Tommy through Tyson, unless you've watched, Love Island, the UK. But unless you watch that, you know him through Tyson Fury. So the only way I can see that fight still being made is if Tyson himself does enough to promote Tommy. If he does enough talking for Tommy Fury to still get that fight. That's the only way I can see it happening. Because if not, why do it? Anderson Silva's a bigger name in the sport. And from what I heard or what I've watched or what I've understood is Anderson Silva's a tougher fight for Jake than Tommy is. Tommy's still very green. Right? Tommy was supposed to fight a dude that was 0-14. That tells you how they feel about Tommy right now in terms of his skills. So if you're Jake, you could fight Tommy, sure. But would that be as many pay-per-view numbers as Anderson Silva? And do you feel confident that you can beat someone like Anderson Silva? To me, Anderson is the fight to make. It's the only choice. It's the only one. Second option, you still make it happen with Tommy Fury. Hopefully Tyson does enough on his end. Hopefully Tommy does enough on his end to push that fight and still somehow try to make that fight happen. I know Jake said he wants to spend a long vacation. He wants to be off. He's probably not going to be back till somewhere like April-ish is what he originally said. We'll see, because he also said that about Tyron after their fight, and he came back pretty damn quickly. So we'll see how it goes, man. We'll see where they go with this fight, what they do next. But Congratulations to Jake Paul. Sucks for Tyron Woodley. The memes were out immediately. Just the amount of pictures, everything that was going on. There was a one picture that was so weird where Tyron Woodley's just, you can see him disgusted by what happened. You see the pain and the disappointment in his face as he's standing right next to Jake Paul's mom, and in between Jake and Jake's mom is Tyron Woodley's mom, and she is dying, laughing hysterically, while Jake and his mom also have big laughs, big smiles on his face, while Tyron is looking like a sad, sad puppy. It was just not a great night for Tyron Woodley. For him, I think his career needs to be done, to be honest. One thing I will say about Jake Paul has made Tyron Woodley a lot of money. Jake Paul has made Tyron Woodley a lot more money than Tyron Woodley made in the UFC. A lot more. Did he need the UFC to get to this point against Jake? Yeah, absolutely, for sure. But Jake is doing things for Tyron Woodley that we didn't really see the UFC do for him. Immediately after Jake Paul's win, Le'Veon Bell, running back in the NFL, comes out and tells Jake, hey, stop fighting guys who can't box or blah, blah, blah. Basically calling out Jake, trying to get a fight with Jake Paul. Not a good idea if you're Le'Veon Bell. I don't know Le'Veon Bell's background, but I would assume that he is not what we would consider a high-level boxer, or at least a really good boxer at all. Well, Jake immediately sees that. He's not going to fight Le'Veon Bell. Obviously, he's trying to continue to grow his name, and what Jake Paul wants to do is get fights that he and his team feel confident that they could win, but that the public feels confident that Jake will lose. That is Jake's best scenario. Again, the caveat to that is they have to be a recognizable name. But if they are a recognizable name and his camp feels like they could win and the public feels that he will lose, that is the best case scenario. Le'Veon Bell doesn't add that. Le'Veon Bell would be Jake would be a minus 1,500 against Le'Veon Bell. He doesn't want to do that. That's not going to be big time payday for him. People tune in to watch Jake lose. They're not going to tune in to watch him be a minus 1,000 against a NFL running back. We already did that against Nate Robinson. He can't do that again. But what he does is, hey, if you're going to make fun of Tyron Woodley, he tags Tyron Woodley and says, hey, take care of this dude. Tyron Woodley would knock you out, Le'Veon Bell. How come you guys don't fight on my next event? If you feel that confident, why don't you fight Tyron Woodley on my next event? Tyron Woodley would do that in a heartbeat, which speaks kind of volumes to Tyron. Like, I get it why people are clowning on Tyron, because let's say he ends up fighting on the undercard, or if he's the co-main event of the next Jake Paul fight, people are going to be like, man, this guy really sunned you. Like, you are really working for Jake Paul now. But if you're making more money, who are we to judge? Who are we to judge somebody if they go out and make more money with Jake Paul than they ever did being a champion of the UFC? How can we judge that? It would be interesting, and I'd be for it, man. But if Tyron Woodley's going to go into any more fights, whether he tries to get back into MMA, whether he tries to get another boxing match with somebody, it's just tough to see Tyron Woodley, man. This is, 6, 7 losses in a row? The last couple being embarrassingly bad. So it'll be interesting to see. It would be really fun to watch Le'Veon Bell and Tyron Woodley on an undercard of a Jake Paul fight. The spectacle, the way people would absolutely lose their mind and hate it. But for Le'Veon Bell, man, where the hell has your money gone? You got broken off some bags and disappeared. When Pittsburgh with the Jets, you were broken off bags and saying, nah, I'm out. What did you do with that money? Why are you trying to fight Jake Paul now? The only reason you're out here trying to fight Jake Paul when you know that there's no way in hell that you can beat Jake Paul is if you really, really need the money. And for Le'Veon Bell, how the hell did you blow that? If you did. But it seems like you did. So how? I don't get it. If he goes and fights Tyron Woodley, man, I don't know. You got to give some better courses on the NFL of what to do with your money and investments to what happens when you're done playing the game. Speaking of done being in the NFL, though, Urban Meyer, gone, out of here. See you later. Thanks for nothing. Urban Meyer's gone. I said this on Wednesday, said this last week, that Urban Meyer needed to be gone. I know they were backing him and backing him. I put out a little conspiracy theory and said, hey, they need to fire him on reasonable cause. And it was just a weird coincidence that the whole Josh Lambo thing came right when they wanted to fire Urban Meyer, that it popped up and immediately after they fire him, but it needed to be done. It might have been a way for them to get out of paying him the guaranteed money, but it needed to be done. There's no way Urban Meyer could have been the coach coming in the next season. There's no way you can get through a training camp with Urban Meyer as your head coach. There's no way you can convince free agents that this is the place to be. There's no way you can convince draft picks that this is a great culture and this is a culture that they should be proud to be in. There's no way that you can convince your veterans to stay on this team and just buy in another year of Urban Meyer's bullshit. There's no way that you can get it to happen. So he's gone. Cool. I'm glad he's out of here. And, for Urban Meyer, what's next? I don't know, but for the Jaguars, it puts you in a position, right? It puts you in a position to grow. You got Trevor Lawrence. Didn't have a great year, but he did have glimpses, and that's all you kind of want to see from somebody's rookie year is glimpses, especially someone's rookie year that is surrounded with this much chaos, surrounded with this much negativity, where you really can't play your best ball. This is the situation that we're in. But you have Trevor Lawrence. You're not ready to give up on him. And you might have the first-round pick. We'll get to why you might have the first-round pick a little later. But you might have the first-round pick in the draft. At least right now, today, you have the first-round pick or the first overall pick in the draft. What do you do with it? Where do you go in terms of head coach? The options are there. Now you get to build. Now you get to start. You wasted time with Urban Meyer. You had a season of absolute just distraction and disappointment. But now you get to try to do what you were hoping Urban Meyer would help the team do. And there's nothing wrong with getting multiple first-round picks. There's nothing wrong with back-to-back years of the first overall pick. There's nothing wrong with it. Is it embarrassing? A little bit. But, I mean, what was your option? Having 4 wins, 5 wins, Urban Meyer keeping his job and being the coach next year? Right? You going from the first pick in the draft to the 10th? What does that do for your team? What does that do moving forward? It does nothing. Does absolutely nothing for your team. So Urban Meyer's gone. Like I said, I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know where he'll be next year or what he'll do moving forward. I think if I'm Urban Meyer, I step the hell away. I see him coming out and he wants to speak and be loud about what was going on in Jacksonville and how disappointed he was, and he's just a competitor and he hates losing and all that, blah, blah, blah. Just shut the fuck up, Urban Meyer. Just shut up, disappear for a year, and then you come back and do whatever you want to do, whether you're trying to be back on TV, whether you're trying to get a coaching job in college. Whatever you feel like you should do, you need to disappear for a little while to let people forget about this absolute debacle you had in Jacksonville before you try to go ahead and come back. We also had some football, man, staying on the NFL. We had the Chargers, Chiefs. That was a really good game. There's a scary sight. Donald Parham Jr. had a really nasty fall. And I'm going to kind of tie this into the UFC a little bit, or MMA in general, or just combat sports, not really even MMA. But in that fall, I was going to say collision. It was not a collision with Donald Parham, the tight end for the Chargers, when he hit himself. If you didn't get a chance to see it, man, it was very, very scary. But it was a weird situation. He went for a ball. It looked like he caught it. He came back down backwards, kind of went to his butt, then went to the back of his head. When you saw it in live motion, it didn't look like a big hit. Like, it didn't look like a hard hit, his head to the floor. No one hit him. He wasn't touched by another defender. He just kind of went back on his own, hit the back of his head on the floor. And it didn't look too bad. When you see it in slow motion even, it was like, okay, there's contact. He definitely, gave a little thud, but it doesn't look terrible. And he was just stiffened up solid. Hands straight out, stiff, couldn't move. Came back from commercial, still was on the floor. They spent so much time trying to work on him, had to remove his face mask, put him on a stretcher, take him out on the field. His hands are shaking. And I immediately just think about, because of how much combat sports I watch, right? Because of how much MMA and boxing and stuff, things of that nature that I watch, I immediately start thinking like, damn, I don't think I've seen anybody get hit like that. I've seen people take way bigger shots. Tyron Woodley just took a bigger shot. Tyron Woodley's shot that he took against Jake Paul was way worse. Way worse and more impactful than Donald Parham, but he wasn't on the floor as much as Parham. He got up a lot quicker. He didn't have to get taken out on a stretcher. He didn't have to immediately go to the emergency room. And the same thing goes for, people like I don't know, any knockout that I see in MMA, any knockout that I see in boxing, you don't see the reaction. You don't see them out completely. You don't see them having to get taken off on stretchers very often. You don't see their hands shaking while they're getting taken off to the side. You don't see that. And that's why hits to the back of the head are illegal. So when you ask how come you can't hit somebody in the back of the head, or you want that kind of violentness, just realize that situation that you saw with Donald Parham Jr., being off on the stretcher, being scared, saying, oh God, is he okay? Is something seriously wrong with him? If they allowed hits to the back of the head in these combat sports, in boxing and MMA, that would happen frequently. And we don't want any part of that shit in the sport. We don't need to sit here and worry about someone's health. We already do. When Tyron Woodley got knocked out, you immediately worried about his health. Then you realize he's going to be okay. And then the memes roll in. But you immediately worry about his health. Now imagine if he stayed on the floor for 15 minutes. They had to clear everybody out. They had to bring a stretcher in to put him on it and roll him out to the hospital while his hands are shaking. Imagine if we saw that constantly in combat sports. It would get shut down. They would shut it down immediately. That's why we don't allow hits to the back of the head. Very scary sight there. I'm glad he's okay. Word is now that he's all right. You know, and there's not any long-term, we don't know, obviously, when it comes to CT and those things, but it's in terms of his motor skills and being able to come back and still play the game, any paralysis or anything like that. There's no long-term injuries in that sense. So he will come back eventually, but I'm really glad he's okay because it was a very, very scary sight. And the Chargers ended up falling to the Chiefs in that game. Just brilliant game. Patrick Mahomes continues to show why he is paid, why he has a $500 million contract. He continues to show why. Everyone was talking about Patrick Mahomes, what's wrong with him, what's wrong with the offense, and then when you need him to explode, it happens. It's kind of weird. The Chiefs continue to be an offense where it's like they just turn on a switch whenever they have to, but if they don't have to, it's like, what the hell is going on with them? But Chargers still need some big wins, and then you come back from that. Going to the weekend that we just had, obviously yesterday, the Packers beat Baltimore Ravens in overtime. Baltimore was very, very close, man. Shout out to Huntley. He had a phenomenal game. But for the Green Bay Packers, they stay on top of the NFC. They're number one in the NFC right now. And the ball's in their court, man. They have a chance to go ahead and finish this off, run the table. They control their own destiny for getting the first round bye and moving into the playoffs, which they kind of need to do, in my opinion, man. I don't know what's going on with Bakhtiari. I don't know what's going on with Jair. Not a whole lot of update. Not in an exact time frame of when they'll be back and what game to expect them to play. But it's going to be some adjustments to get those guys back in. It's not going to be as simple as just adding those guys and boom, everything improves. You're going to have to get them back into the rhythm, back into what they want to do. And it's going to mess with a little bit of what you got going on. But ultimately, somebody like David Bakhtiari, someone like Jair Alexander, if they come back, you want them on the field. You want them playing immediately. Because at the end of the day, they are better than the guys playing in their positions. And it does make your team better overall. So interested to see when they get back. And for Green Bay, man, I just keep looking at their defense and their special teams, and it's worrying me. And this is my gripe. This is my issue that I have with the NFL. If a team's winning in the ways that we expect them to win, we're going to be all about it. We are going to be heavy on that team, and we're going to crown them as favorites, or we're going to be very happy with how they're winning games. But if a team's winning in ways that you don't expect them to, then it's an issue and what's wrong with that team, and you start losing confidence in that team. And a great example is the Green Bay Packers. Right? The last 2 weeks, they're winning games the way we expect. They're scoring 30-plus points a game. Their defense is all of a sudden starting to struggle. They looked really good defensively a few weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. They looked really good defensively. But for the last 2 weeks against the Bears and the Ravens without Lamar Jackson, a banged-up Ravens team, their defense didn't look so great. And their special teams has been god-awful. But yet, people aren't talking about them as big concerns. Most people. You don't really hear people. Everyone's still riding the Packers and riding Aaron Rodgers. Why? Because they're winning the way we expect them to win. Aaron Rodgers has been an MVP-level player. He's been the best quarterback in the NFL this year. And their offense looked great. Devontae Adams still looks unstoppable. They could run the ball with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So because of that, we don't really worry. We still have a lot of confidence in them. Yet the Chiefs, great record on a winning streak, but they're doing it more defensively, right? Patrick Mahomes has only been good in spurts, but he's He's really struggling throughout part of the games. But defensively, they've been solid. Defensively, they've been really good over the last 5 weeks now. But we worry about them for some reason, right? The Dallas Cowboys have won more games than they've lost. Dallas Cowboys sitting here at 10-4, but because Dak and his offense hasn't looked great, we don't really worry about. We don't give credit to Micah Parsons and this defense, even though defensively they have improved week after week after week after week over the last 4 weeks. So because those teams aren't winning the way we expect them to win, but they're still winning, we get concerned and we wonder if they're good enough to make a playoff push. But for the Green Bay Packers, I still worry about the defense, and I still really worry about the special teams. I do not know what's going on with their kick and punt coverage, man. But they need to fix it ASAP. You don't want your special teams to be the reason why you lose in the playoffs. That would be missed field goals, missed extra points, punt returns, big kickoff return touchdowns. Like, you can't lose playoff games because of that. It's just... you want to lose playoff games because Aaron Rodgers just didn't do enough, right? Like, this offense just played great and couldn't do enough, or defensively there was just a team that out-schemed you and they just did too much. Fans will hate if you lose playoff games because of special teams. And as far as offenses, and another team who we didn't really have concern about, another team who we were like, oh man, they're going to get better as long as the offense stays hot, is Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay gets shut out for the first time. Tom Brady gets shut out for the first time since like 2013 or something like that. His first time getting shut out in like 7 years to the Saints, and the Saints just have their number. I mean, there's something about New Orleans, man. During the regular season, they just continue to put it on. There's no reason the Saints should have won this game. None. And they shut out Tom Brady. They scored 9 points and win by 9. Like, it is wild to see Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. But again, this is another situation where people might be down on them. People might be riding the Buccaneers out saying, oh, they couldn't score a single point. Now we're going to be worried. Now we're going to, wonder if Tampa Bay is going to be capable of making a push or winning playoff games because they got shut out to the Saints. Listen, players matter. You take away Leonard Fournette, you take away Antonio Brown, you take away Chris Godwin, you take away Mike Evans, it's going to make a difference. Trust me, this offense ain't getting shut out when they have all those pieces back. And those pieces are coming back. My point being is that no team should be unanimously favored to win a Super Bowl. And no team that is in the playoffs should be automatically ruled out. The 2007 Giants taught us that. The Philadelphia Eagles behind Nick Foles taught us that. You can't rule a team out. As long as they're in the playoffs, anything can happen. Look at what the Lions did to the Cardinals. The Lions have one win this season. This was the first time in I don't know how many years where the number one team in the NFL lost to the worst team in the NFL. And what, are we going to be out on the Cardinals? Are we high on the Lions? You can't overreact. What I'm saying is, any given Sunday, man, if you're not ready to play, if you're not ready to go, if something happens, injuries or whatever's going on, and you have just a bad game plan, the other team just shocks you, does something you weren't expected. Anything could happen in the NFL. Anything could happen in the NFL. So as long as you're in the playoffs, you have a shot. No one should be automatically ruled out. No one should be automatically favored to win it. You got to show up and play those games. And then for Dallas, they moved, thanks to the Cardinals losing, thanks to Tampa Bay losing, the Cowboys moved from 4 to 2. And they were a 2-point conversion. If the Ravens score that 2-point conversion, this is the crazy shit to me, right? Everyone's talking about how worried they are, how concerned they are about the Cowboys, how Dak Prescott and the Cowboys are not going to go far in the playoffs. They won't make it out of the first round because of the struggles of the offense. They were a 2-point conversion from the Ravens away from being the number one seed in the NFC and having a first round bye. A 2-point conversion away from the Ravens to saying, hey, you don't think we're going to get past the first round? Too bad, we already are with a first round bye. 2-point conversion away, and they can still run the table. The Cardinals just lost to the Lions. Who says that the Cowboys can't beat the Cardinals? If the Lions could. But the Cowboys moved from the 4 to the 2 seed. If the playoffs started today, the Cowboys would be playing against the Saints, who the Cowboys beat. I mean, like I said, it's just, the amount of overreaction from week to week to week. The Cardinals were supposed to win the Super Bowl. Then the Bucs were. Then the Packers were. the Cowboys were, 7 weeks ago. We went from the Cowboys to the Cardinals to Tampa Bay to the Packers. We went from the Titans to the Patriots to the Chiefs now. Like, you see what I'm saying? And all it takes is one game. All it takes is one bad loss, and everybody's back off your bandwagon, back onto some other team until they lose, and it's back to another team. Just look at the overall. Right? Are these teams on a losing streak? If they are on a losing streak, I understand why you might want to count them out. We saw it with the Steelers last year. The Steelers were 11-0, and then they went into the playoffs because they just luckily had won one more game on that 11-0 streak to keep them into the playoffs. But they were playing terrible leading into it. This isn't the case with a lot of these teams. The Cardinals should be a bigger worry than the Cowboys. You don't worry about a team who's winning, especially winning by double digits. They won by 15, okay. So if they won 30-15, we would have no worries, but because they won 21-6, it's a concern. As long as you're not going into the playoffs on a losing streak, I feel confident in you. I feel like you can beat whoever, because it's any given Sunday. And even if you go into a playoffs on a losing streak, I'm like, dude, who knows? Tampa Bay's toughest playoff game last year was against Washington, a team who barely made it into the playoffs. The worst record in the playoffs. That was their toughest game. These things happen. It's the NFL. Like, all you want to do is make it in. So for the Dallas Cowboys, yeah, if you're a fan of the Cowboys, if you're a fan of the Cardinals, should you have immense, if you're a fan of Tampa Bay, should these last games give you insane confidence that your team's going to win a Super Bowl? No. But as long as you're in the playoffs, as long as you've made it, you have a freaking chance. And that Cardinals loss to the Detroit Lions, man, it wasn't just, it's one thing, right? It's one thing to lose to them a certain way, but it was a no contest. I mean, Detroit put their foot on their neck and just, that's the kneecaps that Dan Campbell was talking about. Those are the kneecaps that they were biting. That's them coming up with some pieces of limbs when you're trying to put them down. Detroit put a whooping on the Cardinals. And for the Cardinals, Kyler Murray and that offense, man, you want to talk about struggling offenses, there's one. That's what a struggling offense does. Where you need them to come through and they can't do it. And then defensively, a team who's been great defensively, and then you let Goff and the Lions light you up. Very concerned for the Cardinals. I talked earlier about Justin Herbert and the Chargers, and one thing it reminds me of is just how good Justin Herbert is, how amazing he's looked. I mean, that performance, I talked about Patrick Mahomes, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the performance of Justin Herbert in that game either. Justin Herbert's a freaking baller, man. Justin Herbert is really that dude, and it's going to be one of the Dolphins' biggest regrets. Like, I think the Miami Dolphins for the next 10 years will sit here and say, why the hell did we pick Tua over Justin Herbert? Tua, who just this past weekend, right, just yesterday, 2 interceptions, but the Dolphins win another team. Dolphins, 6th game in a row. 6-game winning streak now for Miami. But Tua threw 2 picks. That offense isn't looking great, so we don't really think about them. We don't really give them credit for winning 6 in a row because their offense hasn't looked great. Because they're doing it by playing great defense. They do it by blocking punts and doing it on special teams. We don't really worry about them. They're not really a threat. Who are they beating? Tua threw 2 picks again. 6 straight is 6 straight, man. If it was easy to win in the NFL, we wouldn't have a 1-win team, a 2-win team. If it was that easy, everyone would be somewhere around 500 if it was so easy to win. Winning games is not easy in the NFL, and if you can rattle off 6 in a row, you should be considered a good team. Miami is a good team right now. Were they a good team 7 weeks ago? No. They were 1-6. They were a terrible team. But all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, 6 straight wins, and here we are. Here we are, 7-7, ready to go. Still in the playoff hunt. And another team in the playoff hunt, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers do not die. 19-13 win over the Titans. A game that I would have had the Titans in that game. Yeah, I know it's in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I know Pittsburgh's a tough place to play. But the Titans are 9-4. They're banged up. You just expect the way Big Ben has been playing and Chase Claypool and some of the stuff that you've been hearing. And Mike Tomlin just seems like he's frustrated with trying to keep this team together, trying to get them to play good football. You see all these things happening, and you start wondering, like, damn, man, Pittsburgh's probably done. And all of a sudden, as soon as you want to put a knife in them, as soon as you want to bury them, they somehow get another good win and stay afloat. And this game to me, this season to me, is just, it's Mike Tomlin in a nutshell. Right? No matter what you give him, no matter how many lemons you give that guy, he will give you some great tasting lemonade. Every freaking time we're ready to count out Mike Tomlin. Every single time we're ready to count out Big Ben Roethlisberger. Every single time we're ready to say, man, this team is just not it. They're just not good enough to make it happen. Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers continue to just stay afloat. Mike Tomlin will always just keep his head above water, whether it's Juju being a distraction to the team and then getting hurt, the offensive line, and how they just piece it together, and it's just kind of a weird bunch of guys on the O-line. Najee Harris is a bad decision. You should have went O-line instead of a running back. Defensively, TJ Watt in and out of games. A lot of dudes that you have in and out of games, in and out of the lineup. You can't really stay healthy defensively. Big Ben looks like he's just physically incapable. But yeah, here you are. Here you are sitting at 500, keeping it afloat. You're still in the playoff hunt. Who knows? You get another big win and you're right in it. Pittsburgh just does not die at all. And you have one of the hottest teams in the NFL in the Indianapolis Colts, and another team where, when you look at Indy, they beat the Patriots. Defensively, they've been getting better week after week. Offensively, Jonathan Taylor is by far the MVP. There's just no question about who the MVP is. I know Aaron Rodgers, I spoke about him being, the best quarterback in the league. And a lot of times people say if you're the best quarterback in the league, you're going to be MVP. And I wouldn't be mad at Aaron Rodgers winning MVP. No way. But let's be realistic. With the whole vaccination, immunized whole debacle that he had, lying or misleading people, they're just not going to give him the MVP. I don't care what Rodgers can put up 70 points this next game. They're not going to give him the MVP. It's just not going to happen. So it has to go to somebody else, and that somebody else is definitely Jonathan Taylor. And I wouldn't be upset if somebody said Jonathan Taylor should be the MVP anyway over Aaron Rodgers, because to see a running back put a team on his back, the Colts are doing everything they can to just keep the ball out of Carson Wentz. As long as Carson Wentz doesn't have to make plays at the end of games, that's their path to victory. Take the ball out of Carson Wentz's hands, because he's going to try to blow it. And even a game against the Patriots when they're up big and Jonathan Taylor is killing New England, Carson Wentz still is trying to give the game away. He throws a fourth quarter interception. He had about 3 more that he almost threw in the second half that are right off the hands of the Patriots defenders. Carson Wentz continues to try to throw interceptions, continues to try to lose games for Indy, despite the fact that they're playing good defense and they're just handing the ball off constantly to Jonathan Taylor, who's destroying this game. Carson Wentz still tries to give it away. And it's concerning. What happens when you need Carson Wentz to get it done? What happens when you have to rely on him? What happens when you're playing from behind and not with a lead? What happens when Jonathan Taylor, you just can't keep giving him the rock? What happens when it starts, it's the playoffs and you're down by 7 and Frank Wright's like, man, I know there's a lot of time left, but I don't want to just run the ball and watch this game slip away. And he starts ramping up shots for Carson Wentz, and he starts calling pass play after pass play. Every first down's a pass play. All right, and if it's not second and short, it's another pass play. What happens when that takes place? It's going to take place. Frank Wright loves to throw the ball. Frank Wright hangs his hat on being a great passing game coordinator, coming up with ways to help the quarterbacks be successful. But in terms of Carson Wentz, when you go 5 for 12 and somehow still win a game, Carson don't got to be great. He just has to not screw it up. And that's a great thing for the Colts. If your defense is causing turnovers, your defense playing great, and you have a running back who's the MVP of the league, that's a great path. The thing that travels in the playoffs are defense and the run game. And as long as those two things are prevalent, as long as those two things are winning games for the Colts, here we go. And for the Patriots, The same exact thing, right? Another team that we just talked about. Another team who was the favorite in the AFC. What do we give up on them because they lost to the Colts? We give up on them because their offense didn't look good, because Mac Jones didn't look great? Or we just going to give up on them because they got ran down the throat? Maybe these teams are who they are. Maybe they just had a bad night. Maybe they'll bounce back. Or maybe they were never really that team. We don't know, but again, as long as you're in the playoffs, what are you going to do? Count out Bill Belichick? Okay, go ahead. Count out Bill Belichick and see how that goes for you. So big time win for the Colts. The biggest win of the Colts season happened against the Pats. It's for the Patriots. Unfortunately, you lose another one, but you're still on top of the AFC. You know, the Titans just lost as well, so you're still up there. You're still good. You still somehow get that first round bye and have everything go through Foxborough, which is tough place to go to. Tough place to try to win games at. And then there's games tonight and tomorrow. So there's games pretty much every day this week except for Wednesday. So what I'll do on Wednesday for that podcast is talk about the next week. So I'm going to go through the 4 games that we have, 2 today, 2 tomorrow. I'll get through those teams. I'll cover the spreads, talk about who I think is going to win. And then Wednesday, I'll be able to talk about the Thursday night game, Saturday, Sunday, all that good stuff as we go through it. A couple games got moved around because of the COVID issue that was going on, all the players that were put on that COVID reserve list. So a couple of games got moved around, got added to Tuesday. But first and foremost, the first game is Raiders at Cleveland. For Cleveland, man, you got to win. You got to get this game. I know Baker's been banged up. I know you've had issues on offense. I know defensively, it's, you know, you guys have been hit and miss. I know people are kind of down on the Browns, but if you want any chance in how you gotta beat Las Vegas Raiders. You gotta beat the Raiders at home. They're a 3-point favorite. For the Raiders, it just kind of, this game's tricky to me. I want to just go ahead and pick the Browns, and I'm going to. Let me give it a score, 17-24, Cleveland at home. I'm going to pick them to cover the spread. It's a 3-point spread. Cleveland's a 3-point favorite there. I think they cover. But there's something about the Raiders. They're just like the Steelers, man. They're just freaking cockroaches. They just don't die. They just won't die. You're trying to get rid of them, and somehow you can put all the chemicals in the world on them, and they still somehow pop up and keep moving. It just doesn't make any sense. And for the Raiders, it just seems like one of those games where it's like, okay, finally you guys are done. You've lost a couple in a row. You're not a good team. You've had so many issues this year, between your coach being gone and everything else happening, and the receiver and the corner and all the stuff that's been happening in the locker room, and Derek Carr is still, you know, doesn't have a new contract, and he doesn't, all the things that are going on with the locker room, all the things that are going on with that organization, we finally say, hey, this is the time. This is the time that the Raiders just get out of the way, right? Let Cleveland do their thing. They're still trying to get into the playoffs. They still have a really good shot to not only get into the playoffs, but still a shot to win the AFC North. You know, get out of their way. And it just seems to me like the writing's on the wall for the Raiders to somehow, some way win this game. I'm not going to pick them. I'm going to stay with Cleveland. I want to have faith in Baker. I want to have faith in this offense. I want to have faith in Stefanski. I have faith that they're going to run the ball well. I have faith that the defense is not going to let Derek Carr and Deshaun Jackson do some crazy shit, and that they're going to win this game. Like I said, 17-24. Cleveland wins at home. They cover the spread. Vikings at Chicago, another huge game for Minnesota. They're right there. They're right on the brink of the edge. If they win this game, they actually move into the 7th seed. Right now, currently, I said the Saints were the 7th seed as of today. But if they win this game, they will have 1 loss in their division. The Saints already have 2 losses in their division. So it would move Minnesota to the 7th seed and have them as the last wild card team in the NFC. They're 6.5-point favorites. Chicago's a 6.5-point dog. That's a big spread to me. That's a big spread, but man, the Vikings need this game desperately. And I still like Kirk Cousins. I still like what they have on the outside with their receivers. I still like their running game. And defensively, I think they do enough. Chicago, I just feel like their defense did not play good at all. They still have guys out. I don't think their defense is their defense right now with all the injuries and people that they have out between Khalil Mack and all these boys. So because of that, I think the Vikings score a lot. I don't think Chicago gets those big punt returns, kick returns. They don't get the big plays that they got on Green Bay. I'm going to go 31-20 Vikings on the road. They cover the 6.5 point spread. Give them a 11-point win in that one, 31-20. And then to Tuesday's games, Washington at Philly, Seattle at the Rams. Washington at Philly. Philly's the 6.5 point favorite, obviously because of everything that happened with Washington. All the dudes on the COVID reserve list, all the guys are going to be out. I still have defensive players who are out. Heineke, I don't know if he's going to play this game. Just a lot of dudes still out for Washington, so that line moved in favor of Philly. But 6.5 is a lot. 6.5 is a lot for a divisional game. I know Philly has to get this. I know if they win this game, they stay afloat and stay close to that wild card spot. If Philly wins, then the Cowboys still haven't clinched the division. The Cowboys already clinched a playoff spot, but if Philly wins, then the Cowboys still do not, or I'm sorry, opposite. If Philly wins and the Cowboys do clinch, and I think they do, I think Philly gets the job done. I think they win, but I think Washington covers the spread 13-19. Philadelphia Eagles win. That hook kills them if you're a better. The 6.5 does not get covered by Philly. Washington wins against the spread, but loses the game 13-19. And then for Seattle at the Rams, 7-point favorites are the Rams. Again, a really big spread for a divisional game. I think Russell Wilson is starting to play like himself again. He's slowly starting to come back into rhythm. He's had a couple good games recently. He was terrible when he came back from that finger injury, but his last two have actually been surprisingly good. He's been playing really good ball. I think the Rams continue to stake their claim. The Rams still want to try to move up, and I think they smell blood in the water, right? They see Arizona. They just beat them. They're split with Arizona now, 1-1. They saw Arizona just lose to Detroit. They see them on a 3-game losing streak. They know Arizona still has to play Dallas in a couple weeks, which is not an easy game for them. So I think LA's like, dude, I think they're very, very hungry. They want to get a first round game at home. They don't want to go on the road and play somebody. They're going to be playing their asses off, and I think they get this win. 7 points is a little much. Same thing for Washington and Philly. I think the Rams get the win, but I think Seattle gets the win against the spread, 23-28. Give me the Rams over the Seattle Seahawks on that one. But I'll be back on Wednesday. We'll talk a lot about the games to come on Thursday and the rest of the week. We'll get into UFC. We'll get into some boxing. We'll get into some NBA talk. So Wednesday is going to be a lot of variety. We'll cover, obviously, those games from tonight. Those 4 games that I mentioned, we'll be able to talk about them. We'll see where we're at. We'll talk about seedings, get into a playoff picture. We'll be able to put up remaining games, and we'll be able to take a deep dive, man. So join me back on Wednesday. We'll take a deep dive into what's left for these teams in the hunt, and we'll start making predictions to start getting an idea of who we feel like is going to be the seeds and who's going to be in, who's going to be out. We'll do that Wednesday. But thank you guys, as always, for being here with me today. I appreciate the hell out of you guys. Have a fantastic day. Wednesday is going to be the 22nd. So we'll be good. Friday, also have another episode as well. Do a little Christmas special for you guys. I know the holidays are coming up, man. Hopefully you don't have too much to still do. Hopefully the tree's up. Hopefully the decorations are up and you guys can just sit back, relax, bake some cookies, wrap the remaining gifts, and get ready for Christmas. But I'll see you Wednesday. Have a good one. Peace.